Hey YouTube, this is Ross, and I'm going to show you guys how to make a really quick super saw. It sounds a little bit like this. Alright, and let's start off by making a new sound. So to make a super saw, the key thing to do is we want to have all oscillators on, and we want them all to be on saw, hence super saw. And the key to the super saw is we want to detune some of these saws from each other. So we can start off by detuning these down, oscillator 2 down 2, 1, 2, and oscillator 3 up 2, 1, 2. And let's hear what we have already. It doesn't sound like a super saw yet because we need to, for one thing, we should detune them more probably, but we also need to add pitch cutoff and add pan positioning to really spread the sound out more. So let's start off by doing that. Start by going to unisono and taking this up to 6. I like to use for big wide sounds. Turn that down, and we want to turn on pan position. And you can do full inverted, maybe a little bit closer towards mono. It's up to you guys, but I'm going to do arbitrarily full a little bit right there. And this is going to spread the sound, our 3 oscillators out 6 times this much. So here's what it sounds like with the spread. Okay, and that sounds pretty good. But we want to detune them even more, so let's turn on pitch cutoff and move this up just a little bit, maybe right about there, just to the point where you can't even see this notch right here. And let's hear what it sounds like now. Hear it without it. There's a big difference when you add pitch cutoff and the voicing tab, but if you add too much, this doesn't replace having 3 oscillators. You can't just have 1 oscillator and just do voicing pitch cutoff for 6 voices. It doesn't sound wide enough. So I always recommend you use all 3 oscillators, all saw, and instead of just using pitch cutoff. You can try it for yourself. And this is one thing that I did just for this sound in particular. I took macro 3, dragged it on the oscillator 2 pitch and oscillator 3 pitch, and pitched this one up about 20 cents, and pitched this one, this one down 20 cents, my bad, and this one up 20 cents. And what we have done now is we can change the detune as much as we want on command of the macro. So listen now as I detune it more using macro 3. This is pretty handy if you don't want to have to make a whole new sound, mess with these pitches, and then lose the sound that you had before. So you can just have it in a macro. So let's label this detune. And now what we want to do is, this sounds pretty good as it is, but it still sounds kind of lifeless, and it's not like a realistic kind of sounding instrument. So we want to add, first of all, EQ, highs up a little bit, lows down a little bit, because I'm assuming you guys are going to be using this on top of a bass. Second thing you want to do is, let's add some reverb as usual. Turn the size up, density about there, color down about there, and we want kind of a big sounding wide super saw, so turn the dry wet to about here and listen to it now. Sounds very filling and fills up the whatever mixing space you guys would have. And just for, you know, to add a little more spice, I like to add delay synced. Or you can choose between flanger sometimes, phaser sounds pretty good sometimes. You can add even more detune with chorus and more dimension. But I'm just going to stick with delay synced just for now. And I chose 2 on left, 216, and 316 on right. Turn feedback here, damp about here, maybe down right there, dry wet here. And now let's hear what we have. You can hear it echo and careen off because of the delay synced, which kind of makes it even more ominous or filling, I guess. And yeah, I don't know. Next thing you want to do is you want to have a filter so that we can get some plucking going on, the plucking that we always want. So I like to use for this one Daft, because I've heard people say it's the closest to like an analog filter. And low pass 4 and 2 sound much different from Daft for Supersaws. So I chose Daft. Turn cutoff all the way down, turn resonance down, maybe to about here, and add envelope 1, push it all the way up, and see now what we have here already is our plucking sound. And so you can kind of mess around with it yourself, turn the tack down, but I put mine to about here, level all the way down, release all the way up, or about there. I'll explain why I did the release later. And here's what the kind of pluck we have right now. And obviously, like I always do, add macro 2 to level, push it all the way up. And macro 2 to this level and push that all the way up. And now what we've done is we created, let's label this cutoff, a building pluck sound. So I'm going to play some notes and play with the plucking. So that we get a building up kind of sound that we want from, you know, automation, or I guess velocity and key tracking if you guys have MIDI keyboards, which I've actually never really put on mine just because I'm assuming you guys don't have that. But you can use key tracking or key velocity and then drag it to these, and then that will track how hard you push down on the keys, or which keys you press in particular, for even more control. Oh, I almost forgot. Put this on resonance and turn that up a little. Okay, and we also want bright noise in particular. It really helps your Supersaw punch through all your other sounds in your mix. And so take envelope 1 and push it on amp and push it up to about there. That way when we have low cutoff, we have obviously low noise, and as you go up, the envelope will follow with the cutoff. You can hear the noise on the very first part of the pluck, and it really helps cut through the rest of your mix and makes it stand out. So don't underestimate bright noise, or any noise in that matter. It can really help out your mix. And lastly, God, why does it keep doing that? Lastly, we can add release to make it kind of, instead of just end as soon as you stop pressing the button, which I'll get rid of these effects to better display it. It just stops right away. You can add release on envelope 4, and this will make it kind of dip off not too quickly. So it sounds like this. I'm going to take them off again. even more release. And this can be good for really huge sounding supersaw pads of sorts. So I'm going to turn these back on and now listen to it. That's with more and more release put on, but sometimes you might want no release, so I'm just going to reset that. You just double click it to reset, and take macro 4 and push this up to wherever you guys would want it. Anything past this is just way too much release, so I like to keep it there and call it release. And now when we mess with this macro, you can mess with the release a little bit to make this patch a little more versatile. And there's a few things I forgot to do. We want to, with the cutoff turning up, we want to turn reverb down so you don't get too muddy, and turn delay down past this part, maybe to where this notch would be all the way down, like down here, with where the SE is. And so this way you'll have a really cleaner sound when you push the cutoff all the way. So you see when you add the release, it really helps the sound not sound too digital or unrealistic. And if you guys are following exactly as I'm doing, and you didn't change this release, let's just set this all the way back to nothing. This cutoff will cut off the sound before it even reaches envelope 4. So even if we have the release all the way up on envelope 4, if we listen to it now, it's cutting it off even though our release on envelope 4 is all the way up, and that's because we need to turn the release up on envelope 1. So we need the release on both. Generally you want the release on your cutoff envelope to match that of your release of your envelope 4, which is like amp. So it's usually just a good practice to just have it all the way up, but you might want a specific amount of release. So if you want, you can tie these together . And so you can hear at the end of, when you stop holding the keys, that zero, the cutoff starts to cut off right away in match with the release. And so it just depends on what you guys would want with that. So if we turn this all the way up, you just get like a flowing sound all the way out, because the cutoff isn't, the release is just so much that the cutoff for envelope 1 doesn't come into play before this release is over. So generally speaking, I want to keep mine here for this one, but that's the key to having envelope release between 4 and any of the other ones, to keep that resonance going on. And one more thing that I recommend is, if you guys like Xylent or any other guys who use really super strong supersaws, like also I think Singularity uses it, if you just turn this filter off, which means this is going through no filter at all, it'll just come out as a unfiltered supersaw, and it sounds like this. And this might be because you don't want the plucking sound in it at all, because it would sound very different. It makes it kind of weaker if you want it to sound more like Xylent and Singularity. So you can just turn this on and off at your will, and it gives you a completely different sound. And you can also play with the detune. I noticed, again, Xylent, Singularity, they use really heavily detunes, supersaws with the Xylent bass tutorial that I made earlier, and it gives you that really wide sound. And if you specifically want the Xylent sound, it might even be good to add attack. Gives it that kind of additional side chaining that they have in their songs. But yeah, other than that, this is how you make a really simple Supersaw. Yeah, and so just make sure you have everything all set up. Turn the master down a little bit. Oh, one more thing. You can also add, of course, sample and hold, pitch up, dry wet not up too much, maybe about there. And this gives you that well-known pluck that you might hear in Porter Robinson songs. That sounds really cool. Or AU5, he uses it too. But if you don't want it, again, you can just turn it on and off. You can macro it if you want. But yeah, that's basically it. So thanks for watching, everyone, and I hope you guys have a good time mixing.